I thought last week I was sitting with my mother. Last week I was sitting with my mother, and she was reading the Bible, and she came across an interesting, a strange verse. It is Deuteronomy 14:21, and it says, "You shall not eat anything that dies of itself. You may give it to the alien who is within your gates, that he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God." Now, I mean that seems like a very a bit of the old Jewish law that's dealing with a very practical issue. You have a farm animal, you have livestock, and one of those animals dies. And so, I mean, if you're Jewish, it's just simply that straightforward. For Christians like myself, it's a little bit. It's not quite so straightforward because we believe that to a large extent the Old Testament law and these rules and that kind of stuff. Not per se allegorical, but they have a higher purpose of some kind. And I mean, Jesus made it very clear. He said, "I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." And I think in a previous video, I said something I mentioned, my understanding. Jesus said to the Pharisees when he was speaking to them, "You search the scriptures because you think in them you have life, but these are they would speak of me." I mean, it's very clear in the New Testament that the volume of the book, as I think the phrase goes, is written about him. You could even go so far as to say that not only did Jesus fulfill the law, he's the only one who could fulfill the law. And you could even go further and say that perhaps the law was actually written for him to be executed by him. And so that's, I believe, what we as Christians need to be thinking when we read, odd little things like this, for instance, in Deuteronomy 14:21. If you have an animal, a livestock animal that dies, you can't eat the flesh of that animal, but you can feed it to a foreigner. And I mean, so what does that mean? What is that supposed to mean? Well, I take that to mean that Jesus also said that we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. So in a metaphorical, in a symbolic sense, we as Christians, we as believers, we are his property. We are his livestock. We belong to him. So when I read this passage, what I hear him saying is that when Christ, when Jesus has one of your sheep that dies, you can interpret that how you want to. I'm not going to get into that just at the moment, but the point is, when you have a sheep that dies, you can't use that to sustain yourself or your family, but you can feed it to a foreigner. And to illustrate the point, when I was talking to my mom about this, this is what came to mind. I don't know if you guys know who Russell Brand and Katy Perry are. Russell Brand is he's a public figure. I don't exactly know. Don't recall exactly what his previous work has been, but I think he's been in movies, maybe some TV shows, something like that. And of course, Katy Perry. I don't know. You might not even remember her name anymore, but she was a pretty huge pop star for a while, and the thing is, where I'm going with this is, she actually grew up in a very strong, fundamental, on fire for Jesus family. I mean, you can't get more Christian than the kind of family she came from. But she grows up, and she decides to go on her own way, and do lots of things that lots of people have every right to question, and one of which was to marry this just not good person that was Russell Brand. He was all kinds of messed up, and she marries this guy. Anyway, so as you might expect, they get divorced at some point later on, and and she just continues being the not quite doing the right thing kind of person, and next thing you know, Russell Brand, he starts talking about Jesus. He's talking about, I mean, the guy just got, I mean, he's totally turned around. He's evangelizing. He's talking about Jesus. He's talking about how he loves the Lord and all this kind of stuff. I mean, and what happened there? Well, see, that's why this came to mind with that verse, is like, Katy Perry was a sheep that belonged to Jesus, and she died in some fashion. I mean, metaphorically, of course, but you don't do the kinds of things she has been doing, and experience the life of Christ. She's just not living in that. She's just not indulging in the life of Christ. Whereas and so she was married to this guy who's very clearly not a believer, very clearly a foreigner in terms of the faith. And what happens? So let me read the verse again. You shall not eat anything that dies of itself. You may give it to the alien who is within your gates, that he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a holy people to the Lord your God. So what I'm saying is that Katy Perry is this property of Christ that has died in that metaphorical sense, and she was given to this foreigner of the faith, Russell Brand, and he ate of the dead flesh of the property of Christ, in the sense of he heard from her what it was like growing up a Christian. And what happened? That flesh actually sustained him and produced new life and created, and I mean, it's just amazing metaphorically, in my opinion, that the dead animal that was Katy Perry being fed to the foreigner who is Russell Brand was able to produce a wellspring of life, and now he's probably going to be more effective for bringing this understanding of who Jesus is and what he does for us and all that kind of stuff to so many more people than a lot of people ever could. I mean, it's just so heartening to see what's going on in his life, and that all resulted because of a dead Christian. I mean, it did, right? So that's what I think that verse means, but the larger point I'm trying to make here is that I believe personally that that's how we're supposed to be approaching the scripture, how we're supposed to be looking at these things. And when you read these Old Testament laws, it might seem a little strange, and especially for us as Christians, remember, I mean, if you want to go out and try to obey the law, I mean, you can, and it's probably not going to hurt you. to do these things, but at the same time, it's very clear in the New Testament that if you're counting on those kinds of behaviors to for your salvation, then you're very much misguided. So there's always this tension in Christian circles about what exactly is the purpose of the Old Testament law, and my take on it after much consideration is that the law was written for Jesus. The law was written for something, for this. If you want to know the character of Christ, in other words, you go to the Old Testament law and you read these things and you can see, well, this is how he's going to treat things. And if it speaks of someone who has property, it means that Jesus is going to treat his property in this fashion. And so that's my understanding and how I read these Old Testament laws and that kind of stuff. I mean, it again, you can do it in sort of a naturalistic fashion if you don't want to go around eating dead animals. I don't think anyone's going to fault you. So good on you for fulfilling the law, for obeying the law in that fashion. But of course, the Old Testament law has a larger purpose, and I believe that that's it. It is for Jesus to. It is a description of his nature. And in as much as we are Christ-like, we want to be Christ-like, we need to follow his example in that kind of regard. So, so to bring it application to us as individuals, if you find a dead Christian, you don't really. I mean, it's not gonna. It wouldn't be good for you to be. Taking refreshment from them. I mean, it just wouldn't be. I mean, they're not full of life. They don't have, they're not, yeah. I think you understand what I mean. So someone like Katy Perry would not be someone what you would want to be taking as an example of how to behave. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Now, on the other hand, if you have someone like Russell Brand, who is, just completely rotten. No offense, Russell, if you ever see this, because I think you're fantastic. Now, I really appreciate you, and I mean, welcome to the family, brother. But I'm trying to make a point, and that's that if you're a believer, you don't want to be taking refreshment from someone like Katy Perry, who's just not doing what she should be doing. On the other hand, though, if you do have a dead Christian like Katy Perry, and she goes off and associates with like Russell Brand, she took some of that. She took the flesh of Christ off to these places where otherwise it wouldn't have been, and that has produced fruit. Not to her credit, unfortunately, but to the credit of Christ, who she was just immersed in from a young age, and yeah. I might change. I might go back and edit some of that. But my point is, of course, that her flesh, even a dead Christian knows the message of Jesus and comes with a kind of refreshment and nourishment that a foreigner would never have even considered, and that sometimes can nourish them and bring life to dead places. Anyway, So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for listening. Yeah, bye.